Welcome to the channel. This is Jay Mancini, where we keep the wheels rolling and the cash flowing. All right, guys, so today we're gonna be talking about who has more work and who pays better. Who wouldn't wanna know who has more work and who pays better? All right, guys, so here it is. Let's dive in. All right, guys, so who has more work and who pays better? What we're gonna do here, guys, is I'm gonna tell you the pros and the cons of the three people that give you work and that also pay you, right? So we're gonna have brokers, we're gonna have the quarries and the pits. The quarries could be like the gravel pits or the sand pits, the dirt pits, right? The gravel yards, the asphalt quarries, and we have the contractors. All right, so number one, brokers. Pros on brokers. Brokers are gonna have multiple jobs. What do I mean by multiple jobs? I'm talking about jobs by the load. I'm talking about jobs by the hour. So you have an option, right? A broker may reach out to you and say, hey, this is Johnny Trucking. Joe, I'm giving you a call to let you know I got a job that pays X amount of dollars an hour, or hey Joe, I have a job that pays X amount of dollars per load. So you're gonna have more options, right? Because you're gonna have a broker that could be calling you to offer you more than one job. And this is a plus, right? You may like to go work by the hour, or you may like to go work by the load, or you may end up liking both, or you may get to choose and decide which job you wanna go to. Now, keep in mind, if you know multiple brokers, and I've mentioned this before, that's always a good thing, right? Because that brings more opportunities to you. Now you have more options, right? And that's one of the things to being successful in the business, right? The more brokers you know, there's more options for you. There's more jobs out there for you, right? There could be multiple hourly jobs, or there could be multiple jobs by the load for you to choose from. Number two, guys, flexibility. What do I mean by flexibility? Well, normally when you work for brokers, most of them are flexible. And what does that mean? That means, guys, that if you decide to go work with Johnny Trucking, or you decide to go work with Bill Trucking, right? Or ABC Trucking, that's really up to you, because at the end of the day, you are your own boss. You are an independent contractor if you own your own truck, right? So you could go work for either one of those three guys that I just mentioned. That's gonna be up to you. So that gives you flexibility. Another thing of being flexible, guys, brokers, when you go work for somebody else, they cannot legally bind you to a contract unless you sign one, right? But most of them don't, okay? So that's also a positive thing, and it's also a good thing, right? Because you may work one day for ABC Trucking, but if ABC Trucking doesn't have work for you the following day, you can go work for Johnny Trucking. And if Johnny Trucking doesn't have work for you, let's just say on a Wednesday, right? Then Wednesday, you can go work for, Joe Trucking. That's why you have more flexibility when you go work for brokers. For number three, guys, pay weekly, okay? Now, I'm not sure where you're located, but most brokers pay weekly. And I will say this, and I've said it before, I definitely recommend that if you're gonna work for a broker, make sure they pay you weekly, okay? That should be one of the positive things about working for a broker, and it should definitely be a pro, okay? If you're gonna work for a broker, just make sure you ask them, hey, you do pay every week? They say yes, all right. You come to an agreement, and you'll get paid every week. All right, guys, so I'm gonna talk about the cons. Now, if you work for a broker, if you don't already know, brokers charge what are called broker fees. Now, depending on where you're located, that could range. It can go anywhere from 5% to 10%, 12%, maybe even higher. Now, I'm not sure where you're located, so I don't know the exact rates and what they may charge, okay? But I've been to a lot of different states, and I've heard it range from 5% to about 12%, okay? So keep that in mind. That's how brokers usually make their money. If they tell you, hey, this load pays $100, they may be charging you 10% or 8%. Or 5% of whatever the load pays, right? So let's just say they charge you 10% and it pays $100, then you're really gonna make $90 on that load, okay? So that is one of the downsides to working for a broker. All right, guys, going over to the quarries and the pits, okay? Now, the quarries and the pits, one of the pros, just like the brokers here, they're also gonna have multiple jobs. Now, how do they have multiple jobs? Well, usually quarries and pits have several different jobs where they need the material delivered, okay? So the way that kind of works is a contractor or a construction company calls the quarry or calls the pit and says, hey, H-Town Quarry, I'm calling because I need to order 100 tons or 100 yards, whether it's sand or gravel, or maybe even asphalt, the asphalt plant, okay? That's also under the category of a quarry or pit, okay? Well, when they ask for that material, as I mentioned this before, they're gonna need the trucking services that you provide to deliver that material. So if you're working for one of them, okay, you're gonna be the one that's gonna be delivering that material. And what that means is that they may have a lot of different jobs, okay? They get a lot of calls from different contractors, okay? And they're needing to supply them with all these different materials. That's where you come in and you deliver the material. So that's definitely going to be a pro, because the more jobs, right, the better it is for you. Now, the other thing is they also usually pay weekly. Now, from my experience, I haven't yet seen a quarry or a pit that does not pay weekly. It may be different where you're located, I'm not sure, but most of them will pay weekly. So of course that's an advantage. Everybody wants to get paid every week. Another advantage from quarries or pits, some of them, depending on where you're located, some of them may have some type of incentive when you go work for them, or they may have some type of collaborative agreement with the fuel supplier, okay? And what does that mean? That means that if you work for a quarry or a pit, right, or gravel yard, whichever may be, or an asphalt plant, they may have already an agreement with a fuel supplier, and you may get fuel from them at a discount. Now, that's not everywhere. I know that used to be a big thing back then. Now I know things are changing, but that could still be a thing in your state. Now, one of the cons about working for these quarries, these pits, gravel yards, asphalt plants, okay, a lot of them require for you to sign an agreement. In other words, sign a contract. It's called a retaining contract, or I'll call it a retaining contract. What does that mean, guys? That means that, hey, Bill, you're gonna come work for us, but I need you to sign this agreement that you're gonna come work for us for the next 12 months. Or I need you to sign this agreement that you're gonna work for us for the 6 months, meaning you're gonna be committed to solely working just for them. Now, in my opinion, that's a downside. Why? Because that kind of limits you, right, from going to work for other individuals like brokers and what we're going to get to next, which is contractors. So keep that in mind. If you go work for a quarry or pit, before you do so and before you sign any paperwork, which you'll definitely have to sign paperwork, okay, make sure that you ask them and be upfront. Hey, you're going to retain me, meaning do I have a contract agreement where I can solely only work for you guys? Now, there are some sand pits and some asphalt plants that actually require you to do that here in the greater Houston area, but not all of them. So again, that might not be the case in your state, but you definitely want to make sure with them before you go and work for them. All right, guys, going on to contractors, okay? Pros from working for contractors, okay? Right here, guys, the biggest thing, and I've said this before, they are the main source, okay? What do I mean by main source? They're the ones who provide the work, all right? So if you haven't seen my other videos, let me explain to you real quick. The contractor is usually going to get work from either the city, the county, the state, or it may be just a private job where it could be like a building, a high-rise, a mid-rise, okay, whatever the case may be, okay, or a developer, right? It could be a subdivision that they're going to build. The contractor is going to get hired to do the work. Now, the contractor then needs to call the quarries and the sand pits to get the materials, right, that they need to do this work. And again, the quarries and the pits, who do they call? They call the brokers, okay? The brokers call the guys that own the dump trucks. Or if you're working for the quarries and the pits, you already know you're in their system. You're gonna be there waiting to get your load, okay? However, if you go work directly with the contractors, well, you're working with the main source, right? So this is definitely a big thing, and this is definitely a plus, because if you're working with the main source, this means there's less people now in between you and the contractor. Now, what does that mean, guys? That means the following. You also get to negotiate your rates. Well, quite naturally, if you're gonna work directly with the contractors, you get to negotiate the rate. So they're gonna probably come to you and say, all right, Johnny Trucking, I want you to come and do this job for me, but I need you to give me a quote. So I've talked about this in other videos. You need to be ready to provide them with a quote. And if they like the quote you give them, or they like the rates that you give them, then you already know they're gonna probably call you and say, let's get to work. One thing that I have to point out, guys, now that I'm talking about that, sometimes when you work for the quarries or the pits, they're gonna have what's called a flat rate, okay? Meaning a zone. So let's just say you're working for one of these guys and you're going 10 miles, they're gonna have a flat rate, okay? So they may only pay you, let's say, $5 a ton or $7 a ton or $5 a yard. So again, if you haul 20 tons and you're getting paid $5 a ton, then that's $100 a load, right? Now, I'm just kind of giving you an illustration there. So flat rates, more than likely when you work for these guys, but when you work for the contractors, again, you get to negotiate your rates. So that's definitely a pro when you're working for the contractors, all right? Now, with that being said though, guys, there is a downside, right, to that. Most of the contractors can and will take at least 30 days to pay you, okay? Some can take up to 90 days. Now, I'll be straightforward with you. I've been in this situation for many years now where we have contractors that do take 90 days. Believe it or not, some have even taken a little longer, okay? So a lot of these contractors, they do work, like I mentioned before, for public entities like the government and so on. And sometimes they don't like to pay you weekly or bi-weekly, okay? They have a process that they go through, and this process usually takes 30 to 35 days before they actually pay you. So you got to be cautious with that, and that's one of the things that you have to ask before you go work with these guys. Everything may seem good. They may take your rate. They may accept it. They may say, go ahead, let's sign this contract. But then next thing you know, you start doing work for them, and you're expecting a paycheck. 30 days later, you haven't gotten paid. Why? Because their terms could be 30, 60, 90 days, or they may even say, hey, Johnny Trucking, I cannot pay you until I get paid. Meaning, if they're working for the county and the county hasn't paid them, they're not going to pay you. So once the county pays the contractor, then the contractor pays you. All right, guys, so with that being said, I leave it up to you to determine which one you think fits you better, okay? So real quick here, guys, we already know brokers, they usually have multiple jobs, and those multiple jobs could be hourly jobs and jobs by the load. And keep in mind, they could be throughout the entire greater area. Meaning, if you live in the city, they could be all over throughout the entire city. They could be out through the entire county, which could benefit you because it could potentially be closer to home, right? So keep that in mind, right? Other thing is flexible. Remember, they're very flexible. If you have to go work for another broker, it is what it is. That's the name of the game, right? And usually they pay weekly. Again, I highly recommend that if you're going to work for them, you assure yourself that they're going to pay you every week, all right? The quarries, again, they usually have also multiple jobs, same as the sand pits or the dirt pits, right? They also usually pay weekly, all right? Now just keep in mind, they might not be as flexible, okay? Remember, we want to make sure that they allow you to go work for somebody else, meaning, can I still go work for the contractors? Can I still go work for brokers if I have to, all right? Moving on to the contractors, you already know they're the main source. They're the ones who are going to provide all the work, really, essentially, for these guys and these guys here, okay? So ultimately, that's who you want to work for, but you got to be cautious, right? Because remember, these guys can take 30 to 90 days to get you paid. And when you first start in the business, you're probably not going to be able to do that. So you may have to start here or you may have to start here, which is okay. You know, remember, everybody starts usually here and then they kind of work their way up, or they start here with the quarries and the pits and then they may work their way here. But the name of the game, guys, is to have options, okay? And that's how you have more work. As far as who pays better, I think you probably already figured out you may be able to make more money with a contractor because you get to negotiate your rates, right? However, who has more work? These guys here may ultimately end up having more work. Why? Because these are suppliers, right? They're the ones that are supplying the materials to these guys. So they're going to have multiple jobs. The same thing with the brokers. The brokers are going to be supplying trucks to either these guys, or better yet, the brokers may be supplying trucks to both of them or all of these guys, essentially. So they're always going to keep you busy. So now I give you the details and you can decide who suits you best. Is it the brokers, the quarries, the pits, or the contractors? With that being said, guys, I hope you found this video valuable. You already know, like and subscribe, leave a comment below. You know what we do here? We keep the wheels rolling and the cash flowing, and we'll see you on the next one.